Welcome to Adapt It, the podcast where we explore adaptations of various forms. I'm today's host, Tom, and with me is...
Pat?
And KJ.
Today we'll be discussing West Side Story and My Fair Lady from 1957 and 1956, respectively. Those are their stage premieres. And their adaptations, West Side Story and My Fair Lady, from 1961 and 1964, respectively. We should also probably mention that these are adaptations from other stage plays, straight plays. You have 1914's Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, which becomes My Fair Lady, and then obviously from, let's say, circa 1600, Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare or someone like that. Anyway,
And to be fair, he stole that from Pyramus and Thisbe, so we're going we're going all the way back to Ovid here.
Yes. So our adaptation from Ovid, which then became I Want to Be in America. So this week's musicals feature adaptations from classical dramas. We have Pygmalion, which was George Bernard Shaw's, his most popular play in his day, and probably one of his more lighthearted ones. It premiered in Vienna in 1913, and I know I just said 1914, so forgive that mistake, with the role of Eliza Doolittle expressly written for the English actress Mrs. Patrick Campbell, who played the role opposite Sir Herbert Beerbohm.
I'm a Campbell man myself.
Beerbohm Tree insisted on a happier ending than the one Shaw written, which Shaw felt imposed upon to write. He did, and it forced a happy reunion with Eliza and Higgins. Shaw wrote an extensive afterword with the published edition of the play explaining why that ending was crap. He wrote another ending in which the impossibility of them getting together was expressed, and he just basically kept fighting with this ending. The happy ending made it into the musical, as you know, but there are two endings Shaw wrote in which Eliza runs away from Henry, and neither of them got on stage. My Fair Lady was arranged as a stage play and then a film in 1961-1962 by CBS, who then sold the film rights to Warner Brothers for an unprecedented $5.5 million plus 47% of the box office gross. At that time, Julie Andrews, who was an unknown actress, was playing the role on stage, and she was replaced by the more bankable and more famous Audrey Hepburn. The film won Best Picture in 1965, as well as earning 12 nominations. West Side Story was developed by Jerome Robbins, and it initially was called East Side Story. It was about Jewish immigrants, and Robbins shelved it for about 5 years. He later met up with Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim, who wrote the lyrics for it in Sondheim's Broadway debut, with a book by Arthur Lawrence. The show premiered in 1957, and it moved to the silver screen in 1961, and under the direction of Robbins and Robert Weiss of Citizen Kane fame, the movie went on to win 10 out of 11 Oscar nominations. The 21 reboot, directed by Steven Spielberg and written by Tony Kushner of Angels in America fame, had 7 Oscar nominations, including an Oscar for Ariana DeBose, who won the award for the same role that Rita Moreno won it for 60 years earlier.
What's the one it lost?
Oh, best screenplay. Best screenplay. That's what it lost.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how it got nominated, but
that is a really good start. So I'm gonna say I liked neither of these movies. I think the Spielberg version was my favorite of the 3 I watched this week. And actually, I also watched for this week the 1938 Leslie Howard version of Pygmalion, which follows the Shaw play pretty closely, except for the happy ending. That had to be my favorite. The 1938 version of Pygmalion on Criterion Channel is excellent. Everyone, don't watch these movies. Maybe watch the Spielberg movie. Go to Criterion Channel and watch the 1938 Pygmalion. It was not part of this, but it's excellent. It's funny. It's compact. It does what it's supposed to do. And and it's very well performed. Then there are these movies, there are these adaptations, which are about 2 hours and 40 minutes each, and boy, do they make you feel it.
They make you feel it
They do.
with their 8-minute overtures.
Yes, which, yes, originally the overtures were meant to welcome Louis the 14th into the theater, and that man has been dead for about 350 years, so maybe we can stop doing this now. But anyway, how about you guys? What did you think of the adaptations overall?
I enjoyed them.
Well, which
I'm a big fan of musicals.
I am too.
The original West Side Story, wonderful movie. I think the dancing is great in that movie,
Dancing is
and you can
love.
actually
The
see it,
dancing is really
right?
good. The dancing is great.
Dancing's
I really like
awesome.
that. That's the best part of West Side Story. I like the costumes actually in West Side Story too.
Mhm.
I really liked the
Costumes
costumes.
are
I
great.
love the
Yep.
colors. It's got that sort of I mean, I know it is literally Technicolor. It's got that Technicolor like kind of comic booky, but not in like a fake way, just like a really bright, vibrant. I love the colors, love the
Mhm.
dancing in West Side Story. Yeah.
Hmm.
The gym especially. I love the gym, the way the gym looks, that back wall, the red there.
Oh yeah.
It's not a
Hmm.
plain red, it's kind of smeared. It really is exciting to look at.
It has that like, which I really like. I mean, I like Dick Tracy, the 1990 movie, but it's got that kind of Dick Tracy feel almost. Those like like the bright yellows and the bright reds. I really like that. I like color.
Well, and the new West Side Story, the Steven Spielberg one, when I first heard about it, I was a little like, what is he doing? What is Spielberg doing? He's remaking West Side Story, one of the most classic movies going, the same year that In the Heights is coming out, right? How often do we get a musical? Now we're getting two that are kind of competing, and I love In the Heights. We saw the stage play, my wife and I. It was great. So I was a little upset. And then I'm watching it, and it's a wonderful movie. It's a bit of an extended like Target commercial. It has that feel of very composed, very snappy. A lot of the dancing isn't front and center. The dancing is in the movie. I don't know how
The
to
dancing isn't featured as much, I would say.
right. It's in the background instead of the focus. Right, Tom. I think you brought up Gene Kelly says no. If you're gonna shoot somebody dancing, they're front and center. They're straight on. You're
Oh
focused
yeah, Fred
on
Astaire said that. Yes.
Fred Astaire. Okay. Whereas in Spielberg's, no, the camera is dancing more than the people. It's moving around. It is all over the place. I don't want to say it's like a bad fight scene in a movie because it is fun, I guess. But I like I don't know about the choreography, but the blocking of the original West Side Story. But you watch it and it's wonderful. And I heard Spielberg wanted to make it because the play West Side Stories was one of the things that inspired him to get into the entertainment business. So now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy who's given us so much, I'm upset that he's making a movie that he just wanted to make, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I also watched the Spielberg. I enjoyed it more than the original also. And the dancing isn't as vibrant, and the set art direction isn't as vibrant either. That being said, one of the biggest problems with the 1961 version is the leads are kind of duds. And in the modern version, they are not. They're really wonderful, both of them. I like both of them, especially her. And it ends up working really well. And he makes some changes to make the plot make a little more sense.
Yes. Yep.
Which is you have the male lead, Tony. In the 61 version, he's such a like a bright-eyed, doe-eyed doofus. Like you can't imagine this guy ever being in a gang or doing anything wrong. He just looks like
He reminds me of
like
Archie. Like he's got a very
yeah,
Archie feel.
yeah. Like, and he seems to have no idea that people are getting in fights around him, even though he supposedly started the Jets. And in this version, a change that Spielberg and Tony Kushner make is he has just come back from juvie. He was in a fight and he almost beat someone to death. And now he's trying to, after spending time in juvie, he's trying to not, he doesn't want to be a jet anymore because he's like, oh my God, I almost killed someone. And so when he kills Bernardo, it doesn't come out of left field. It's like, oh, this is a guy who could kill people. And then he does, right? So that makes a lot more sense as opposed to the movie where the guy's so kind of dopey that when he kills Bernardo, like Bernardo kind of accidentally runs into his knife. I think that's what they're going for. Because you can't imagine this man actually doing any violence because he's too busy looking into the mystic or something like that all the time. That's a big change. And also Natalie Wood is about as like her name implies, she's pretty wooden in the 61 version. But it's a lot more better in the revised one. And they do a really interesting change, which works well, which is, and it's also pretty funny. The slum they're living in is being paved over to make room for Lincoln Center, which is hilarious because Lincoln Center is where West Side Story premiered. And so the whole thing is, it's that joke, but also everybody is going to be evicted in about 6 months. So they're fighting this turf war over this area that's not going to be there in 6 months. And it just kind of highlights, instead of being silly, it highlights their sort of desperation
And the futility.
and the futility of it. Yeah. Like these are people who, like, they really have nothing. And so they're going to fight over, it's literal rubble. Like a lot of the houses have already been knocked down, and a lot of the movie is filmed on just piles of rubble that they're fighting over. That has a kind of nice poetic feel to it. And there's a few other changes too, like the "Keep It Cool Boys" song, which I kind of hate, worked really well in the Spielberg version. In that version, they give it to Tony, and Tony is, when he's saying "keep it cool," they make it before the rumble, so it's Tony telling them not to rumble. That becomes the objective in the song, as opposed to in the 61 version where it's after the fight, right? And they're like, "Hey, calm down."
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
if there's
like,
anything we need in our climactic moment of our film, it's an 8-minute dance interlude of everyone saying, "Let's not get too dramatic here." Whoa, whoa, whoa! We don't want to have an exciting film on our hands here, people. We want to make sure the audience knows this is chill.
yeah, that was one of the cringier songs in it, but yeah, so I like that a lot.
Another change that Spielberg made, which my understanding it's back to how the original play came out, is the "I Feel Pretty" song is right after Bernardo dies.
Yes. Yeah.
And that did not feel good. I thought that worked better in the original.
Which song?
Like you have this like
I feel pretty, oh
the
so
one
pretty.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
so Bernardo dies and then they cut to the girls with the dresses, and so it was supposed to be a
Ironic,
juxtaposition.
yeah,
Is that the right word?
juxtaposition.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I guess ironic
Um,
is quite, yeah, juxtaposition. Maybe.
but you're like pretty raw about Bernardo dying, and then you're supposed to just lighten up, and
Yeah.
you know. So that was one change I didn't really
Huh.
like too much.
I didn't mind. I guess I kind of like the juxtaposition, but I see where you're coming from. Yeah, it's a choice, certainly. I like what they did with what's his name, Carlos, the guy who ends up killing Tony. In the 61 version, he's just one of them, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, Carlos, the cousin.
Yeah, he's
Yep.
just one of them. In this, the Spielberg version, the Kushner version, he took Maria to the dance, and when they go to the rumble, he's kind of on Tony's side. He's like, we shouldn't rumble, and so he goes with Tony and kind of helps Tony get into the space where they're rumbling. And after Tony kills Bernardo, he then takes the gun. And so there's this nice arc of development with him where he becomes one of these kind of violent people when at the beginning he's in school to study and get out of the slums, and he's a very nice guy. That was really cool. And they do that all without dialogue. It's just in where he is in the scene, they look at each other. You get most of that is communicated without dialogue. It's very effective. There's a lot of changes Spielberg also made that I didn't like, but I think mostly I think it worked a lot better.
So how does this compare to Romeo and Juliet? I think the last time I read that was high school.
I reread it for this, so I did it.
Yeah, I did
reread
too.
it, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, Romeo and Juliet, I say that it's of Shakespeare's good play, it's his worst good play. Like Shakespeare has he has some clunkers that are just bad, and then he has some good plays. This is I think Romeo and Juliet is his worst good play. Like it's still good, but he's got much better plays.
Yeah.
It's sort of like,
It's a transition from like Titus Andronicus to like the great tragedies.
yeah, because it's not really, I mean, it is a tragedy in the sense that sort of like, yeah, a lot of people end up dead at the end, but it's also like, Well, it's a tragedy that just hinges on a letter not getting there at the right time. It's not, it doesn't hinge on some character making some tragic choice that it's like, I gotta go forward with this thing. It's like, no, if the letter had got there, everything would have been fine.
Mhm.
So, I struggle a little bit with the play in general, but the problem even with the movie, like West Side Story, I mean, Romeo and Juliet always comes across a little corny, but I feel like you kind of buy it that, oh, okay, they see each other the first time and they fall in love. In the movie, it comes across as just deranged. I don't know. I did like
Yeah.
literally, I'm like, no human being ever would react this way. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't do this. So it just comes across. I don't know. I found it very fake in this, and I found it a little difficult to sort of accept it. I guess when you watch the Shakespeare play, you sort of accept it. This was almost trying to be sort of naturalistic and justify the fact that they loved each other at the very first sight that they see each other across a dance floor, but I just didn't. I mean, I don't know. I didn't buy that. Um, I also, to be blunt, don't really like musicals. I do like some musicals, and maybe it's worth discussing why those musicals are better, but I don't know. I find it very long, and I didn't find many of the songs to be all that interesting in the sense that, okay, they're having, I like the idea. Okay, we'll have the balcony scene will be instead on the fire escape. That's cool. Cool idea. Cool modernization there. But at the same time, it's like, oh God, why are they still singing? It doesn't help convince me that they're in love. I don't really like the song. I don't like I'm just like, God, I just have to sit here and watch it. I'm a grumpy old man.
A buddy of mine growing up, he saw his first musical, and he came back and he goes, "Why don't they just say how they're feeling? Why do they have to sing all?"
Uh,
But I don't, I mean, I guess I understand the musical element to it, but I just feel like certain musicals do it well. Like there are great American musicals. I love Fiddler on the Roof. I think that's a great musical. I love Cabaret. I love Chicago. Like I think those are great musicals that really use their songs and they really well. They really are entertaining, or they draw out the characters, or they're moving, or they're really, really doing something. For almost every song in both these musicals, I'm like, they're not doing anything. They're not even that tuneful for the most part. Some of them aren't, right?
yeah, I think that's true, more true of My Fair Lady. I think the music in West Side Story is very nice, especially that what you get with the overture, which is a nice. I mean, I know we crapped on the overture a little bit, but what's a nice quality of the overture is you get all of the kind of motifs and the music at once, and then by juxtaposing that with the songs and hearing the motifs again in a different context, it kind of makes the music feel like it's richer than possibly it is. It kind of gives it a sort of length and richness to it. So I would say I enjoyed a lot of them. I didn't enjoy the music of My Fair Lady, with the exception of On the Street Where You Live. And one of the Higgins songs I liked, I thought was funny. But
But just so many of the songs in West Side Story, though, are just. I'm trying to think. Like, I guess maybe it's the acting because I just
the
did not
acting's,
care about Tony and Maria.
yeah,
Like, I just didn't care
mhm,
whatsoever. So
they're really
watching them
bad.
sing about their love is just completely
Boring.
boring.
Hmm.
But Anita and Bernardo are
Are
great.
great.
They're really fun. Like their numbers are very entertaining, but they're sort of supporting characters, so they don't have as many songs, and you know, therefore, there's so much of the songs I'm like, as we said, the cool song is meant to be one of the great that's a highlight, and it's so dull.
It's not a great song. It doesn't come in at a good place. It's not really convincingly performed
No,
because they're not that. And part of it is the book is so bad. The book part of it, the script part of it is just there's not a line in this that I find convincing, except when you have Rita Moreno saying things, right? She's great, and Bernardo as well. But outside of that, like nobody says anything that you're like a real human would not say that. And I looked up reviews at that time to be like, would people actually talk like this? Am I being? It didn't just not age well.
come on,
And
Daddy-O.
yeah, but most reviewers who didn't like it said, this is corny. I can't stand listening to these people talk. And reviewers who did like the movie say, while some of the book is a little difficult, the music is so lovely that you get past that, blah, blah, blah. So I think the songs are fighting the book. And you're right, a lot of them don't do anything. Like the Keep It Cool is really just about people calming down, which doesn't do anything because it doesn't lead anywhere. It's not like
They
they're
weren't that worked up anyway, and what's the point of keeping them calm when 2 seconds later everyone's going to run in with a gun and say, "We need to run around and find Tony"? I'm like, well, then what was the point of that
yeah.
8 minutes? I actually did like, you know what I did like, and again, it wasn't the song because I couldn't even sing a single note of the song, but I liked the image was the when they're doing their quote unquote wedding in the shop.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
liked that. I actually liked the lighting. I liked the costumes. I even kind of the scene before it wasn't actually bad. That was their
Mhm.
best moment was the like, when they're playing with the mannequins. I was like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, this is fun. Like this is
Cameos.
actually something I could see people in
Mhm.
this scenario doing. Like it's exactly what they would do. So
Yeah.
that was fun. That
Mhm.
was one of the only ones. But again, it's like the song, I couldn't sing you a single note from it. I
Mhm.
couldn't sing you a single line from that song. And it was like 6 minutes long.
Mhm. They do in the Spielberg one. They do that at the cloisters. They go visit the cloisters and they do that wedding thing.
I love the cloisters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually really lovely. It's so much better that song in the Spielberg one. But I think like in America does a
That's
lot.
clearly the best song. Like
That's
that's
it's
that's
clearly the
it.
best song, and it does something. It gives you two competing attitudes, and you understand where these people are coming from,
Yeah.
and so you get the characters like she is here to become successful, and he wants to go back to Puerto Rico. He can't stand it. He wants to go back to Puerto Rico, and she's like, no, this is where opportunity is. Blah blah blah, and it doesn't. It gives a background to it, and it does something. Um,
And I actually really like this. This is the only thing I saw in the Spielberg one. I didn't watch it because I couldn't sit through that musical again. But I did watch that one scene because you guys said to watch it, and it's a great scene. Like it's really fun. I said I love her dress. It's like the sound design in that was very good because clearly they didn't capture that at the time. But when they do, then she like I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like it's a really fun number. I think it would be hard to make that number not fun. So it's really good. That's a wonderful number, and it's the only one I think in the show that I really enjoyed that I think is really good.
I like the song Maria, just na 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 Maria, but he doesn't perform it particularly well.
Which
So
one?
I just met a girl named
Oh,
Maria.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think, I mean, it's a fine song. It's memorable, but
His
it
performance of it is quite.
it's pretty. I like the actor who I think was in Baby Driver, right, KJ, who plays Tony in the.
Oh, maybe I may have seen Baby Driver. That's the one where all the diegetic sounds match
Yeah,
up with the
yeah.
music, right?
Ansel Elgort was the guy, and Rachel Zegler was Maria in that.
She was a great Maria.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
this is the Spielberg
Yep.
one?
Hmm.
yeah. I mean the my God, I mean I know we're crapping on the guy who played Tony, who went on to do lovely work with David Lynch later on in a completely different role.
What
Um,
did he do with Lynch?
he's in Twin Peaks. He plays the owner of One Eye Jacks in Twin
Oh
Peaks.
yeah,
Not
he's
One Eye
great in
Jacks,
that. I
right? The
forgot.
hotel. He owns the hotel, not
He
the.
later owns
Oh,
One
he
Eye
owns.
Jacks, doesn't he? Doesn't he later own One
I
Eye
thought
Jacks?
he owned One Eye Jacks also.
Oh,
He goes
maybe he
there a
does.
lot.
Oh, maybe I'm wrong. It's been a little while, but
I can't remember now, but yeah. Horn, is that his name?
I think so.
mhm,
Yep.
Yeah,
yeah,
Horn. Oh yeah, he's great. He's great in that.
yeah. Well, oh, but now I mean I know we've been crapping on him a little bit, but like Natalie Wood, my God, that woman has one expression. The whole movie, she had like a slight smile. She doesn't even have a big smile. She has a slight smile. She has the exact same response to somebody marrying her as she does to hearing there is a dance, to somebody knocking on the door to tell her breakfast is ready. She has one response. It was excruciating. All you want to do is go back to,
And cast
Bernardo.
Anita in that role. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
just put Anita in that role because she's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Just whoever, whatever, anybody can have done that better. Like it's just incomprehensible how that worked out.
So have you guys seen the Flight of the Concord episode that's based on West Side Story? Do you guys know Flight of the
No,
Concords?
I've
Never
never
said
seen
I've never
it,
seen
but
it.
I've heard of
I
it.
know it. Yeah, I've never seen
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, so they're a two-man band out of New Zealand, and they have a show on HBO where they're a band from New Zealand trying to make it in New York. And it was season 2, episode 3, called "The Tough Brits." And Brett starts a gang because he raps about other rappers and he disses them, and he gets nervous that they're gonna come after him because he sang the song in the library. and they're gonna find out. So he starts a gang, but the whole thing is, almost not quite song for song, but parodies of West Side Story. Highly recommend it. It's really funny.
Okay. That'd probably be more enjoyable than this. Yeah. But I think maybe one of the reasons why, not to hold on to this for too long, but why Romeo and Juliet work a lot better is that there is much more of an arc of development with Romeo and Juliet. There's Romeo's kind of a dummy, and Juliet sort of educates him through that play, and so you see them kind of changing and growing together. In this, they really take to heart the whole star-crossed lover thing. So these characters don't really do very much. Well, they do quite a lot in Romeo and Juliet. Um, but one of the big problems I think with Romeo and Juliet too is that Mercutio is far more interesting than everybody else in the play. I remember Harold Bloom
So is
said,
Tybalt. He's got a
"Yeah,
great.
so is Tybalt.
I
Yeah,
love his name, Prince of Cats. I forgot that was
yes,
his name. I'm like,
yeah,
man, that is a moniker to like. That is a great name to be
yeah,
known as. He is
mm,
the Prince of Cats. Like, oh, that's a good
yeah."
name.
And did you remember the Queen Mab speech that
Yeah,
Mercutio does? That's a lovely little thing. I got to play
yeah.
that once. That was a lot of fun. But
So who's Mercutio in West Side Story?
he's the guy who's like the other leader of the Jets.
Because he dies. Basically, the only reason Mercutio is there is to die and
Mm,
then make Romeo kill the Tybalt character, who's the
mm,
Bernardo character.
yeah,
So, it that's the semi proxy. But I don't even remember that.
Riff.
Is
I
that his
think it's
name? Riff.
Riff.
Yeah,
And I
Riff. So
only
he's Riff.
yeah, I
Yeah.
only know that because I have it in front of me right here. Um,
That's the
yeah.
sign of a good play when when many of the characters' names you can't remember.
Mhm. Yeah, but it was but yeah, I love the Harold Bloom criticism that they had to kill off Mercutio, otherwise he would take over the play because Romeo is so boring relative to him. Um,
I mean, I've heard that it's like I remember was it I can't remember where I read this or someone said this that it's really the tragedy of Juliet. Like she's the one who actually does everything and
mm,
sort of moves it along and ends up taking on essentially the sort of like tragic hero role.
mm,
And Romeo just kind of putzes his way through it and then just kills himself at the end. You know,
yeah.
like he doesn't. It's really the tragedy of Juliet. She's the one who actually makes tragic choices more than
Mm.
anyone.
Yeah, yeah, and you kind of realize that from the beginning because she's just so much smarter than him. And he also is kind of a star-crossed idiot, right? Because in the beginning of it, he's in love with Rosaline, and then he just sees Juliet, and suddenly he's in love with her. She seems to be a much more of a grounded character, um, and I think that's probably why that works. And there's also no indication as to why these families are feuding. It's just sort of a stand-in for conflict. Well, with this movie, they give you reasons why these people are fighting each other. There's kind of these bigotries and immigration problems and what have you, which I don't think works quite as well. I think it works better when it's just, we don't know. It's just a conflict that's been around forever, and there you go.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, this is one of my theories about these movies as to why we can probably talk about it more at the end, but as to why these movies were so popular and why musicals were so popular in this 50s and 60s period. There's a lot of musicals that win. The other musical that wins in the 60s is Sound of Music wins Best Picture. But there's a
oh,
lot of, I know we're not
these
going to
are
get into them.
better than that.
I know they're better than that, but we're not going to get into those. But there's a lot of musicals during this period that are sort of nominated or being made. This is kind of the heyday of the Hollywood film musical.
And it's
But
also it's ending too. It
yeah,
goes off a cliff after this.
yeah, well, because they become so expensive, they sort of start bankrupting things because it's sort of like you make them, and if they do well, you make lots of money, and if they do poorly, you absolutely tank. So they stop making them really until Chicago in like 2002 is really when you really start getting the musical kind of makes a comeback. But when films do social problems, we kind of talked about this before a little bit. One of the things I think that's happening here is there's a shift away from social problems before tended to be an individual's problem that gets addressed through the story. So something like the Lost Weekend, it's dealing with the social problem of alcoholism, and it's dealt with an individual's struggle with that specific thing. A character, he has a past, he has a future, he has a family, he has all these things, and that occurs, I think, in a number of these movies that are sort of dealing with that. what seems to be happening in the 60s is they're moving away from sort of looking at individuals' problems and how they need to deal with them and looking at a social problem that's a group problem that we need to deal with collectively. And musicals do that well because they don't really have, I mean, there are characters, but they're not really that well defined. And musicals can get away with having characters that aren't all that well defined because it's not really about that. And so these shows in particular have a little bit of an amorphous quality. Now, My Fair Lady's a little different because it's based on a play that has really, really strong characters, but that doesn't come out as much in the movie, I don't think. And I think a lot of it becomes more about dealing with social problems on a collective level than dealing with them individually. And musicals help with that, I think, because they abstract personalities, they abstract character, they sort of, this is the Brechtian thing, they force you to think about something over a period of time. I think that's sort of what's going on with these more, again, more so in West Side Story than My Fair Lady, but I think My Fair Lady as an adaptation of stage play is doing that. I just think it's a terrible way to, it's just a boring way to deal with problems because I don't need to be hit over the head with it. If they had done West Side Story and made it between Puerto Ricans and Americans, Native Americans, that's not a great term, but made it about, sort of just this immigration story and not made it quite as explicit. Like keep the song like In America. That's a great song. That actually explores the problem a little bit directly, but make it less about that and sort of just you don't have to hit me over the head with it. I can get what the source of the conflict is without you banging it to me and making me pointing it out to me and constantly turning my head to see it. It's like, no, I got it. I can see what this problem is, and it's a legitimate problem. And that to me is more interesting. That's what I think one of my problems with even that change, because I think it's a bit too heavy-handed with the problem. If you're going to talk about a social problem this way, it's more interesting to me to sort of weave it into the characters and the narrative than to just kind of keep turning my head and telling me what it is.
Yeah, and you could see that with Pygmalion. Pygmalion actually deals with social problems. The play, not My Fair Lady, the original stage play I think deals with the social problems in a really interesting way and without resolution. With the problem with these plays, and Spielberg and Kushner amp that up a lot. They really direct your attention to the problem, and sometimes kind of a preachy way even. It's one of the changes that doesn't work in the Spielberg one. But the problem with using this kind of musical to deal with social problems, or a romantic musical, is that everything in West Side Story is obvious. And that can be fine if you're not doing a social problem. But social problems, if you reduce a social problem to an obvious solution and an obvious conflict, you're probably not capturing the social problem very well. And
To
so
be fair,
having
West Side doesn't have an obvious solution to the problem.
no, no,
It doesn't have an obvious solution to the problem. It has an
um,
obvious. I mean, what would
problem.
you say? What would you say it's
It's,
proposing as the solution?
oh, I think it's just stop fighting. Let's all just get along. I think that's what it's saying in the end, because in the end they pick up the body together and walk off. Right?
Yeah, I
I
guess
think
that's
the
kind of true.
movie thinks that. Right? It's just like we love each other and we need to stop them from fighting. I mean, it's one of the problems with the movie is he's already convinced them in the Rumble to just have two guys fight. That's it. There's not going to be really any danger. But he goes down there anyway because the solution to the problem is no one ever fighting, which of course is an idiotic thing to do and makes everything worse. But I think that's what they're saying. I think the movie's just that dumb. It's just like, just just get along, guys. Like it thinks that that's how you fix this, and that's why I think it doesn't work. It's a little stupid. And while I'll say the Spielberg movie directs your attention more to the social problem and more in an irritating way, it does have a little bit more subtlety, um, in the sense that these are really desperate people, the poor whites who are losing their neighborhood, that they are very desperate, a sort of desperation you don't capture in the 1961 version. Um, but yeah, I think that's why it's kind of dumb. And if you see plays or
Yeah, it's
musicals
a
that do,
little hard. It's a little hard in the 1961 version to accept that these people are in extreme dire straits when they have these like beautiful clothing and dresses and all this. I'm
yeah,
like, you guys are dressed better than I am. I mean, I'm
yeah,
wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, and you guys are wearing this beautiful clothing.
yeah. Yeah, it is. But when you see musicals that can do it well, something like Chicago does explore a social problem, I think, an institutional problem of
It
justice,
absolutely 100% does, and
and
it
it
doesn't
does
hit
it.
you over the head with it. Yeah.
It doesn't hit you over the head with it. It's delighting in the sort of sins of the social problem, and I think maybe that's how you deal with the social problem really well, is you sort of have a lot of fun with the problem, right? You're like, ooh, isn't this appealing? We can manipulate the justice system. This is Chicago. We can manipulate the justice system in ways that are, when you think about it, and don't even have to think that hard, are really unfair. But it's so great to watch them get away with it. And there's a kind of delight in it. And I think that's what works really well with social problem plays. Or you could do the Brechtian route, and we don't have to explain Brechtianism, but just to say that um, Brecht doesn't make any of the problems in his plays simple. There's nothing easy to talk about in Brecht plays. That doesn't mean I agree with Brecht's interpretation of social problems, but I don't think Brecht is putting up something very simple. I think his plays are attempting to offer kind of different angles. And the obvious solution that a character can take in a Brecht play will lead to something really bad for that character. So you kind of get the rock and a hard place that they're in. West Side Story can't do any of this. Pygmalion, the play, I think can in a lot of ways. And I think in part it's kind of lighthearted, it's very funny, but it also doesn't offer.
But it's really, really funny. Like it's a hilarious play. Like I was reading it, you kind of laugh out loud. I didn't laugh in My Fair Lady until they got to the race scene, and I went, "Oh, that actually is kind of funny." Like watching her do the like, "I had an aunt who died," like that's funny. Of influenza, like that was actually that was funny. I laughed at it,
Yeah.
but that's a long way into that play before you laugh. Like
Yeah,
it's a
that's
long, long way. And in just reading Pygmalion, I'm like, this plays. And the thing is, almost all of the book is lifted directly from the play.
mhm.
It's actually is the play, just with all this extra stuff added in. To your point, the bloat last week when you were mentioning the bloat. My gosh, you ruin every joke because you insist on singing a song about it. Stop it.
And the music isn't that good either. It's really unmemorable music, and it's really thin. That was the thing I was surprised with My Fair Lady. The music is thin. It has like no texture or character to it. I think maybe that's why I liked On the Street Where You Live. I just like that song, but it's also when that song comes on, you're like, oh, an orchestra. Oh, wow. This is much more compelling. But getting back to the social problem thing in Pygmalion, I mean, what's Pygmalion's presenting, and I think you really see it especially with the father character, is that there are all these problems with class and whatnot that just don't have a resolution. But yeah, but Pygmalion doesn't offer you easy resolutions, and so that is what's really so compelling about it, I think. Um, it is really funny. It's really enjoyable to look at those things, and it doesn't seek to answer these questions it's bringing up. And the questions are also kind of hard to parse out, right? I mean, like, what social problem is Shaw bringing up? I know it's class and speech and how behavior inflects class and whatnot, but it's that's very general, and the things he's doing, I think, are a lot more interesting than that. And then you get the movie, and yeah, the movie isn't. The movie probably has all of those problems in it, but as you're saying, Pat, you don't really notice it because you're, you're wading through these kind of these really uninspiring
Just a
musical
little bit.
numbers.
Oh, just a little bit.
Oh, they
God,
ruin him. They
they
ruin the
ruin
father.
his character. He's
Yeah,
much funnier in the play.
he's
In
much.
Pygmalion. He's
Mm,
much, 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 much funnier. I mean, he's uproarious. He's really one of the best characters. Like the when he has like he has a fairly long monologue, and that's the one, and it's a totally convincing monologue. He gives like a really good speech about basically how he doesn't want too much money because if he gets too much money, he'll have to behave. And he doesn't want to behave. He wants to go out and get drunk every night and and sleep with women, and that's what he wants. But if he gets money, well, that's a problem. Then he
Mhm.
can't do that anymore. So he gives a fairly long speech, and that's they use this line in the movie, but it's really funny. And they say they're like, if we let this man continue talking to us, he'll, we're going to have to elect him to parliament or something like that. And it's really funny in the play, and they kind of say it in the movie, and it's almost like a throwaway. I'm like, that's an uproarious line. Why did you can it? Why did you toss it away? There's just a lot of that kind of stuff that gets lost in there. But his and then his, as we said, it's like his get me to the church on time.
Makes no sense.
Why? You don't want to go to the church. Why are you singing a very long song about getting to the church on time when you don't want to get to the church on time? The song, the musical, at least the movie, it reminded me of, I did a review once. It was a Gershwin review that I was in. And you could tell that they just had famous Gershwin songs that they wanted to put in this play. And they basically, I guess it wasn't a review, it was like they took a whole bunch of Gershwin songs and they were like, we're going to make a new musical out of this. And so at one point, there's literally a whole section where they wanted to sing the song by Gershwin called Slap That Bass. And there's no reason for it except that somebody finds a bass and then literally just starts slapping it. And they're like, ah, yes, you should slap that bass. And then they sing a song about it. Like, you you just you just needed to get that song in there.
Mhm.
And there's a number of times where they would just be like, we want to get this song in. Just have a person say the line and then we'll put the song in. And that's what this felt like. It felt like songs that weren't really written for this show were put in because they liked the song, but they didn't know quite how to get it in there. Even what's that song
I
like,
could have
until
danced
he
all
I
night.
could have danced all night. I'm
Doesn't make
like,
any sense.
why are you why are you in love with this man? You danced with him for like 30 seconds, and there was nothing in the scene to indicate that you cared at all about him. But then you walked out of the room and sang this song and are now telling me that you're in love with him. This is the classic like show don't tell. She's literally telling me. I'm like, I have no idea why you're in love with him, but I guess you are. The song makes no sense, but I guess they wrote the song and were like, "This is a cute
Gotta
song.
put it somewhere.
How do we get her to sing it?"
I was so confused. I thought she was happy that she learned to speak well, but then in the lyric, she's clearly indicating an affection for a male person, a person with male pronouns. So I'm like,
I guess
either she's personified her new accent as a man she's in love with, or it's
which, quite
Higgins.
frankly, would have been kind of fun. Like that would have been
Yeah,
a more interesting scene.
yeah. I mean, you could have made. I guess you could have made that funny, like like she's in love with her, and you could have done the get him to the church on time song if he plays it sort of ironic, like, yeah, get me to the church on time. I don't really, like
Yeah,
that type of thing. You could have done that, but he's like marching around with joy and
very
talking to all these
earnestly
people.
telling people, "Get me to the church on time."
Yeah,
Like this song makes no sense.
it ruins the character because his first song, when he's talking about being a layabout, I really liked how they staged that, where he's walking around trying to get money from people while they're laboring. He's just going back and
Yeah,
forth over a ditch where everybody's working, and he could be working that job and have the money, but he's the undeserving poor. He doesn't want to do that. And I thought, oh, that's very funny. You're kind of matching character and setting. That works, but then get me to the church on time is completely ruins it. Um, he's the best part of the play. He was my favorite part of the staged play, the straight play. His middle class morality speech is really, really, really funny, and he's a really interesting character. And then he gets so what happens in the play. It's the same thing in the musical, KJ, where he's like, he just wants to be a layabout, but he ends up getting a grant basically that he gives 6 speeches a year for.
well, he's required to give up to 6 speeches a year when they invite him, and they make the line in the play, which is great, and they say, "Oh, don't worry. After you give your first speech, they will never invite you back. Don't you worry. That will not be a problem." Which
Uh,
is funny.
yeah,
That's a joke. Why
it's really
wasn't it in?
yeah. I guess they didn't include that. Yeah,
No,
but
it wasn't in there, and
didn't
that
make
was
it.
funny.
Yeah, but it was but basically now he has to be like a middle class person, and I love this idea of like, well, you could just turn it down, just say no, you don't want it. And he's like, well, you try turning down this money. That is my favorite part of the play, because it gets that kind of that bind these people are in, but yeah, they kind of drop that. what did you guys think of Henry Higgins and Rex Harrison, who's very, very famous? I think this is like the role he played for decades on stage. Um, I will say I thought he was pretty boring in it. If you see, I don't know if anybody watched the 1938 version with Leslie Howard.
Yeah, he was a much better Higgins in the
Yeah,
38 version.
yeah. He's
And I know I've said this
hilarious.
before, but I think in the musical, if it was John Cleese, it would have been so much better and would have
Yes,
made so much more sense.
yes, that would have worked really
He's
well.
he's supposed to be super rude, like really rude. And that's, I mean, I guess he's a little rude, but it's like it reminds me of I saw a production of Galileo, Brecht's Galileo with F. Murray Abraham, and I guess in my head in the script it seems to suggest that Galileo is just this like grotesque. He just eats all the time, and he's almost this just like he's brilliant, but he's meant to sort of just be a glutton, almost just constantly eating, drinking, like obsessed with food, and like, that's the whole thing is that like when he gets pressed, this whole thing, he's like, well, I can't sacrifice all my food. I'm like obsessed with himself. And when F. Murray Abraham does it, F. Murray Abraham is a very aesthete. He's sort of had much more of a like, ah, yes, this fine wine. I'm like, no, he's supposed to be like guzzling the wine. Like it just didn't. And so this didn't strike me as the same way. I'm like, he's a little rude. He's not the nicest guy in the world, but. You're supposed to get the fact that this guy, I mean, I love the line. Again, it's a great line. They did keep this one in the movie, is the when I think what's her Eliza says, You cheat, I liked the colonel because he treats a flower girl like she's a duchess, and he says, well, I treat a duchess like she's a flower girl, and that's the point. He treats everyone like they're beneath him. He's just constantly really rude, and I didn't get it. I just didn't see that. He seemed not all that rude all the time.
He's rude to her, but really to no one
But no one
else.
to no one else. And the whole thing is
Yeah.
he's rude to everyone. He is rude to everyone. He's rude to his mother. It's just it's not there.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that was this they needed her to end up with him, which just feels
So,
like such a betrayal to her
mhm.
to have her end up with him because he is, I mean, he is really mean to her, but
Mhm.
it was like, well, we can't ever be like rude to everybody. Why would she ever end up with this guy? And so they kind of felt like they had to, I feel like, undo that. But
Mhm. Yeah, it doesn't really work. I also, the ending is so unconvincing. I can't imagine anyone making it or seeing it was convinced by it. Kind of reminds me of the filmed ending of A Streetcar Named Desire, where it's like, this is the most unconvincing thing.
how
Because
does it end? I don't remember.
well, in the play, it
I know
just,
how the play ends, yeah.
yeah, but in the movie, she leaves him. Stella leaves him.
Oh, I don't remember
And he becomes a boxer.
Yeah, but
that.
Am I
That's the
mixing
movie
up
we should have
movies?
done, by the way. I'm
yeah,
really sorry. I should have picked. I should have
Streetcar.
picked over it. No, on the waterfront.
Oh, on the waterfront. Yeah,
I thought we were
uh,
talking about on the
I
waterfront.
did mix them up. Yeah, I
yeah.
mixed them up. I
Yeah,
was
No,
but I should have done on the waterfront. That would have been a much better plan.
but they
A much better
censored
movie.
it because the according to the Hays Code, the villain has to be punished. So she leaves him in the last scene of the film because we need to punish Stanley for being a villain. But it's not very convincing, and it's clearly nobody making it was convinced by it, and they're like, let's make this unconvincing ending because we have to, and anybody watching it will be like, this is clearly wrong. Whatever, we'll just dismiss it, and that's what the ending of My Fair Lady feels like, and the ending also of like the 38 Pygmalion too, which also has her coming back to him, just because they were
But it's like, I
forced
mean,
to
no
do
one,
this.
I mean, just imagine. I mean, this is the like, imagine this thing going, continuing. Just imagine her living there for another 5 years. It will
Mhm.
never work.
Yeah, it's and there's no reason for her to come back.
No.
There's no reason. She just shows up to get his slippers. So yeah, it is a portrayal of her, and that's what Shaw wrote about. Shaw was basically like once Galathea, is it Galathea, right? That's the character that Pygmalion creates. Like once she is free, she's free. Like she has to leave. That's the whole point of the play, is that she has to leave, and the question is, what kind of freedom is she going to have? Um, and so he wrote, like I think he wrote a 30
Yeah, I have.
page.
I read the essay. It was at the
Yeah,
end of my copy. It is long.
it's long. Shaw's
And
famous for
basically,
that.
it is a very, very long essay justifying why she had to leave him. And it's fairly convincing. He's basically just like, this guy is way, but he will never let her
Mhm.
be a real person. And so she ends up going with where she marries the dude who's the
Freddie.
Freddie. She marries Freddie and they open a flower shop and it struggles for a while and he gives a very long description of it all. But the thing is that's a lot more convincing. I can absolutely see a character like her settling with a Freddy
Mhm.
than just being slapped down all the time by this other dude. It's never gonna happen.
And with Freddie too, it's he needs her and she can raise him up. That's something she says to Higgins is that, I can bring him up. I can take care of him for however long he needs. And that's that seems to be what she's been given this power and now she needs to use it in some way. And so yeah, even though Freddie isn't an equal to her anymore in whatever new guise she has, it's still something that can function well as a relationship. Um, ending is interesting, and Shaw did that a lot, right? He would just write about the play in published versions of the play. Man and Superman is the real famous one, where it's just there's like a 120-page
I love that play. That's such a good
monologue
play.
essay in it. But yeah, it is a very good one.
That's my
Um,
favorite Shaw play is Man and
Man
Superman.
and
I love that
Superman.
play.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um,
So can we talk about some other retellings of Pygmalion, maybe?
sure.
I'm going to throw some out and we're going to decide.
Okay.
We're going to decide.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right here, audience, we're going to decide. Start with Trading Places.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I think
You haven't seen
so.
Trading Places?
No.
It's
It,
Was
Ed
it
Murphy, Dan
was it
in
made
Aykroyd.
this
after
portion of
19
the
was it made yeah, now we point out how Pat hasn't seen any movies made after 1960.
Mhm.
I
This
haven't
is
seen
the
it, no.
portion of the show where KJ yells at Pat. But
I
I
haven't
would
seen
say
Trading Places.
Trading Places kind of is, and I think they're doing very
Okay.
similar things. Trading Places, it's basically these two millionaires on Wall Street whose son-in-law is that how he's whatever. There's
Related? I don't remember.
whatever they're really old and rich. They're kind of Waldorf and what's his name from
The
the
Muppets.
Muppets, yeah. Um,
Statler and Waldorf.
Statler and Waldorf, thank you. Dan Aykroyd's their sort of apprentice, and he's getting very rich. And they're like, I bet it's just society that's made him like that. If we put another guy, a poor guy in his shoes, he'll do equally well in the market. And so they find Eddie Murphy, is he homeless or?
He's homeless and he's begging,
Mhm,
pretending to have no
yeah.
legs.
And so they throw Dan Aykroyd out. For some reason, they have control over all his money, and they just put Eddie Murphy in his house, and then Eddie Murphy becomes this like successful financier. And the whole bet is between the two of them is would this happen? Is social conditioning what makes a person or what have you?
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
very, I would say that sounds certainly
mhm,
comparable.
yeah.
Right? All right, next one. This one's a little more off the wall. Flowers for Algernon. Algernon.
Um,
The scene that made me think of it is when she goes back where they're selling flowers, and she's like, "Oh boy, I can't go back here.
mhm.
There's no way. I've climbed in status. I can't go back." And I feel like in Flowers for Algernon, when he's kind of towards his peak of intelligence, he recognizes that he can no longer do what he used to do at the lower intelligence.
I guess it's a transformation of sorts. Do you think it's a social one? It's been a while since I've seen Flowers for Algernon, so
Flowers for
I've read the,
yeah, I read the
I've only
yeah.
read it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. No, I guess they're not really
I don't
commenting
know though. I mean,
socially.
it's not a comment socially, but it is not dissimilar in the sense that what I think is you could argue is that it more informs something like Pygmalion and My Fair Lady in the sense that an individual having their intelligence sort of increased in that way changes what they can personally and socially accept. And in the same way that just changing the way that a person speaks in these plays is an equivalent. It informs those plays, I think, is more that just the way that a person speaks alters what they're capable of and what they think of themselves. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily an adaptation or a pulling, but it certainly helps to inform the others.
Mhm.
You can make a parallel between them.
Yeah, and maybe how society treats them.
Yeah.
Right?
How
They treat
society,
her
yeah.
How
terribly.
society treats them changes, how they see themselves, all of it changes. Just and in this, in an intellectual sense, there's more of a concrete change that has occurred because this person can do more. They physically are, not physically, but mentally are capable of more. Whereas with the speech thing, they are essentially exactly the same. So that's why I say it informs it, because in the same way that this is an actual change in Flowers for Algernon, the other thing is just superficial. The person's exactly the same, and yet it's as if they have radically changed their intellectual capability.
Yep. All right, another one. Phantom Thread. Have you guys seen Phantom Thread?
No.
No.
Daniel
I
Day-Lewis.
heard it was terrible. That's what's
Yeah,
his.
it was a long movie. All right,
I
we'll
don't know
keep
if I've
moving.
ever
Audience,
seen
let us
Daniel
know on
Day-Lewis in a
social
movie. I don't
media.
know if I've
He's
ever
pretty
seen him in a
good
movie. I don't think I ever have.
Lincoln.
No. There Will Be Blood. I've heard of them. My Left Foot. I know he did all these movies, but I don't think I've ever seen him in a movie. Sorry.
No, I
Side
think it's worth
tangent.
seeing. Hmm.
Yeah.
Wayne's World 2.
I haven't seen
No, I'm
Wayne's
just
World
kidding.
2.
That would be phenomenal.
Oh, I was like, I mean, sometimes you get these good actors who show up in those kind of movies. They're just
Well,
like,
Charlton Heston, right?
Charlton Heston.
yeah.
Yeah.
They're basically like, I get a paycheck. They'll pay me $100. It pays for my pool boy.
Pat, if you get a chance, go watch the Charlton Heston scene in Wayne's World. It's really good. All right, one more I got. Another newer movie. Poor Things.
I haven't
Have you guys
seen
seen
it.
Poor
No.
Things?
I saw two of his other movies and thought I don't need to see another movie by this man.
By that guy.
Yeah.
In this one, it's William Dafoe is a bit of a Dr. Frankenstein and creates. Yep.
Is this the sex one or something?
There is a lot of sex in Poor
Yeah,
Things.
okay. I haven't seen it.
But he kind of creates a girl, or puts a young brain in a fully grown woman, and the fully grown woman is trying to figure out the world. And then it's almost as if the Greek language guy in My Fair Lady or Pygmalion picks up what's her name, Eliza, picks up Eliza and then shows her around the world.
Mhm.
That's kind of what Poor Things.
Oh.
I mean, again, I don't think it's wrong in the sense that, and again, I think it helps to inform the other place, because there is a sense that just by changing her speech, she moves from being a societal child to being a societal adult. They tend to infantilize the poor or the lower classes and treat them like their children. And I mean that's not just the theoretical. They did. That was the actual justification for a lot of the class system, was that they are like children and we're the adults and we have to guide them through. So there's this sense, just by changing her speech, that you're essentially taking a child, giving it the abilities and the voice and the body of an adult, but you never actually hold the brain to match it, so that you can certainly see a parallel.
There's a book, I can't remember the author, but Babel 6, I think it's called. And it's a Sapir-Whorf book. It's basically, if you learn how to do this speech, you can see the world in a brand new and different way. And it takes from, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that the language you speak
The only
shapes how
Worf
you,
I know is the one from Star Trek, so that's not the one I'm assuming you're talking about.
I don't know who that is.
Isn't there a Worf on Star Trek?
Is there a
the
Worf
dude's
on
name?
There's a Worf on Star
Yeah, there's a
Trek.
Worf on Star
Yeah,
Trek.
he's
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's a Klingon on the Next Generation.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've
They
seen that
overcame their
program.
racism against Klingons and
Oh,
brought them on
so
board.
this is like, it's also West Side Story. All right. But anyway,
That would be phenomenal. West Side Story in Klingon, in like the original series setting. Audience AI,
Now
let's
you
make this
know.
happen.
Now you know. Talk to Spielberg, make it happen.
Dr. Spielberg.
I want to be in the Federation. I want to be in the Federation.
By the end of this podcast season, we'll have that done. But the Sapir-Whorf was this idea that the language you speak shapes how you see the world. And it's mostly radically been disproven, but in a lot of these books relied on it as a sort of premise for their science fiction. And that's going on a little bit here, too. It's a little bit inverted. That's how you speak is how people treat you. But I think Eliza also doesn't see the world anymore. She doesn't belong in the old world anymore. So I think there's anything with that kind of functions in that same way. Well, I mean, I think the thing is, and I remember a professor said this once, that, studying literature and movies and things like that, it's the depository of all bad ideas. So no economist is a Marxist anymore, but there are plenty of literary critics who are,
Yeah.
and like no psychologist is a Freudian anymore, but many lit crits
I was
people
going to
are.
throw out Freud, but I didn't know if he was still popular amongst the psychiatrists or so.
I mean, he's
But he's
always
great. But everyone he
there,
shows up in literature, like he's all over lit.
all over there. Yeah, and that seems to be the case. Like
But they're
literature
fun. I don't
study.
know, literature, but it's a fun way to encode. It's a fun way to encode. It's a fun way to sort of group your ideas. I don't know. I
Yeah,
find them,
and
even if
it's
they're not accurate, they're
helpful.
effective, they're helpful. That's why I say I'm like I'm not, I don't think Marxism is at all effective for predictive economics, but it certainly sometimes helped with explanatory in the past, and it sometimes works for literature or film. It's just it's a terrible system to build a society or an economy around, but it's really interesting and it makes for really interesting books and historical theories.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's also the people who read this stuff believed it and wrote books.
yeah.
So you have to get an insight into how they saw the world, even if the ideas themselves are not to endure.
But the problem, but I guess I would also throw out the problem with the thing is that if you think about those ideas, I don't think so. There's no equivalence to them today. There's no equivalence to that as to how, those type of coding systems that were used in 1850s through 1980, let's say,
Hmm.
that were used for that kind of thing. I don't know if we have modern equivalents, that
Yeah, we
there's a
do.
modern
I
you
think we
think there are
do.
modern so you think there are
Yes.
modern philosophical systems that are popularly
Y-
accepted
I
that
think
can do
yes.
that?
I think things like queer theory and things like that are philosophical systems that do inform the making of literature and film.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I think a lot of theories like that.
I don't think there's many though, and I don't know if they're all encompassing social systems.
I think if you look at like queer theory or a lot of race-based theory or intersectionality theories, I do think they are looking at society as a whole and trying to explain it in a certain way. And I think that does influence a lot of art and even
I just
popular
don't think
entertainment.
I guess I just don't think they've permeated popular culture to the same extent. Like I think in the 1950s, most people could pretty concretely explain to you most of the ideas of Freud or Marx
Mm,
or Darwin or these kind of social systems, these sort of these systems that were used to inform literature. I don't think your average person on the street, if you went to them and tried to get them to discuss what actually is in queer theory or intersectionality or any of these
mm,
theories, they couldn't have them with you. These are academic theories that
mm.
haven't permeated popular culture
I would,
in the same sense that one could speak about them. I'm not saying that they
yeah.
haven't affected
Mhm.
literature, but I don't think they've permeated in the way that most people could discuss them in a
Mm.
concrete, educated manner.
Well, part of the problem is that Darwinism or Marxism is more contained. There's a guy at the back who
But that's what
has,
I mean. That's
so
why
it's
I'm
a little
saying these are so
easier.
popular. That's
But
what I'm saying. I'm not
I,
saying they're right. I'm saying they're
mm,
popular because of that, because they're
yeah,
concrete, they're defined, they have they're encapsulated,
mm,
they're relative, and that's why that often makes them wrong because you can define them relatively easily, and I
mm.
just don't think we have that degree. But I agree, there certainly
I
are
think
theories.
yeah, I think intersectionality. I would disagree. I think intersectionality has the popular culture bubble,
But then what I mean, I guess it's just like I don't know what it means, and I'm gonna guarantee you most people couldn't define it for you.
I don't think many people could define the term, but I think they could know it when they see it.
But I think most people in 1950s, 1960s could define Freudianism. They could
Hmm.
define Marxism. They could define Darwinism. They could define concrete theories that were used to explain the world and explain economic and social systems,
Hmm.
and they could define them. I think they knew what they were, and I think they knew how they worked. Again, I'm not saying that made them correct, but they knew what they were and they knew how they worked, and therefore they could put them into novels that were pretty popular and useful. I don't think we have systems like that anymore, that most people could define themselves and recognize in literature as being that thing.
I think you can recognize certain ideas about race, class, gender, sexual
True.
orientation, and
Yes, I
how
agree.
those, and I think there's something particular about the 21st century interpretation of how those systems worked that is different from past interpretations. And I think you
I
can,
absolutely, but
mhm.
they're not discrete systems that could be defined.
Yeah, I guess they're not discrete in the sense that you're dealing with a group of philosophers who are kind of on the same page, but there's some overlap with the different works they're doing, and there's some separation with the different work they're doing, and
And I guess
that's
it, but
fine.
even
Yeah.
even the systems that I'm defining, and I mean, again, I think this is your point. Even the systems that I'm naming, Darwinism, Freudianism, Marxism, they're people, they're individual people who proposed ideas that therefore are that are sort of locked down. They
Hmm.
become sort of prophetic books almost in a canon. There's no prophetic book of
Hmm.
gender theory. There's no prophetic book. There's no one person. Obviously, those theories are all over literature and film and
Hmm.
popular culture, but there's no one thing that if you wanted to know it, if you wanted to know Marx, you could go
You
read
could
Marx. If
read
you wanted,
Das Kapital. Yeah.
you
I
could
mean,
go
they
read it. You know
put
what I mean?
this like book that's popular that people have read that actually appeared on the Tonight Show, I would think would be like White Fragility. White Fragility,
Or even the How to Be an Anti-Racist. Like that's another one, right?
yeah,
Those are
that's
those are
that's
certainly out there.
Kendi's book,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like White Fragility, D'Angelo was on not Jimmy Kimmel. Who's the Tonight Show guy?
Isn't it Jimmy Kimmel?
Who does the Tonight Show?
Anyone want to help us?
Jimmy Fallon.
Was it
Yeah. She was on Jimmy Fallon discussing this. You know, the Tonight Show's the Tonight
Jimmy
Show.
Fallon really does the Tonight Show?
He does.
What happens to the Tonight Show?
The internet happened. We don't have to watch it anymore.
But
We could
that's what
do
I mean.
something
But I'm
else.
like, I know, but I'm just like, I mean, I used to love it when I was a kid. I used to love watching. I used to watch Leno and then Conan. It was great. And Letterman.
Conan
And
was
whenever, and
Letterman
you
was
used to,
good too.
you'd flip between Leno and Letterman,
Hmm.
like on the commercials, and you go from CBS to NBC. It was great. I
Hmm.
really liked it.
Yeah, and we
And then
all loved Conan.
occasionally you'd go to Jimmy Kimmel, who was on ABC.
ABC, I think.
ABC. You'd occasionally go over, you'd occasionally flip there. And then, yeah, and then you go to Conan.
Hmm. Yeah, well, Conan was later.
Conan was afterwards. Yeah,
Yeah,
Conan was at 12:35.
and Conan was everybody's favorite, I think, which is why like
Conan was my
Mysterio.
favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody I knew that was their favorite, which was a complete mystery that he lost the Tonight Show. But anyway, but yeah, I think she was. Yeah, she was on that show.
But
Mm.
this is my thing. There's no like we don't have those types of systems that are easily defined. I mean, like if you asked me to define Darwinism in a few sentences, I could give it to you pretty quickly. If
Mm.
you wanted Marxism, we could give it in a few sentences. If you wanted Freudism in and how it gets used in literature and how it's used to organize literature, we could do it pretty quickly.
Mm.
Those types of systems just they're not there. That's not a bad thing. They're just not there
Mm.
right now. We don't have those types of systems. We have an amorphous set of ideas of how we understand people organize
Mm.
thoughts and ideas, but we don't have like discrete systems that are definable in a few sentences.
I, I I think you could define it in a few sentences, and I think there's I
And again,
just
I'm not saying you couldn't. I'm saying most people
yeah that
couldn't.
average individual. I think the average individual will be able to kind of know it when they saw it. But yeah, I would say there isn't, you know, Robin DiAngelo is not Charles Darwin or Karl Marx, um, and for good reason. She doesn't have the skill of those writers. Um, but
I think we just don't have the ambition of those writers. We got to bring those back. We got to just write world-defining
mm,
systems again.
yeah, yeah, was
Tom,
Hegel
Tom, you've got a project now.
yeah.
Now you know.
Put down the avocado toast
Yeah,
and
and
start
start
writing,
and
Tom.
start
Well,
it. You
Come
write a
on.
world-defining
mm.
system, just like that dude in Hedda Gabler who book she burned. That's what that's what you need to do.
Who's the last world-defining system? Do you think it was Hegel? Well,
No, Freud,
Darwin isn't
Freud,
Freud. Do you think? Okay.
Freud is the last one. Freud
Hmm.
is the most. Freud is the one who
Would you consider Wittgenstein, or is Wittgenstein too limited?
I don't know who that is.
Okay. Um, Join us next week. We're just-
Too limited.
I would say the last. I would say the last one was probably Freud. Maybe Einstein, but I would say
Yeah,
Freud. I
I
would say
mean,
Einstein sort of is there.
I would argue Ludwig Wittgenstein because he
I
comes up
don't
with
know.
how
Oh, is
language
he
works.
Is he Wittgenstein? Is he that?
Wittgenstein, yeah,
Oh, that dude. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, maybe. Again, he's not popular though. Most people don't know who he is.
Okay, fair enough. I do think his ideas about language kind of defined how we systematically think about language.
But
Maybe
no one systematically thinks about language. Most people don't systematically think about language. They don't do it.
Do they systematically think about evolution?
Yes.
The average person on the street, they don't think about how language works, but they think about evolution.
They understand the principles of it to a limited degree, and it informs partially how they understand the world.
Hmm. And they understand language to a limited degree, certainly, because
But they don't understand it. I don't think most people are sitting there thinking about how words work. I mean, this was we kind of talked about this like name of the rose. Like most people aren't doing that type of
mhm.
thing. Like it's just
But even things like does your speech accurately depict the world? Right? This is a Wittgenstein problem. People don't think about that. Even if they don't know who Ludwig Wittgenstein is, they don't think about like, does my speech depict the world
no,
accurately?
they just kind of yell. I mean, this has been a problem for many years. They just yell at the world, and then they put emojis on their comments. Like it's not a way like this is I mean there is a certain notion of it, but it's like the most common way would be like, well, if you don't know what I'm saying, then that's your problem.
Mhm,
Like that's a very I would say that's a common thing you
mhm.
see on internet threads. You see it very commonly is like it's your fault you don't know what I'm talking about. You just don't have
Okay,
the 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 capability of knowing it. And there's no notion of like, well, it's the fault of language or the ability to communicate or the
mhm,
ability of words to be able to communicate.
that's at fault.
There's no sense of the futility of that.
Okay, I will say I think the average person does think about race, gender, class, orientation,
Yes,
and how those things fit together.
absolutely. But there's no definitive defined system by which they could there's no system that everyone could point to that they could collectively organize their ideas around. Again,
I,
like a Marx or a Darwin or a
yeah,
Freud or
there's
these
not
kind
a
of things.
person, but there is certain critical philosophers who have done that. Even if the average
But
person
no
doesn't
one,
know.
yeah, but no one knows who they are, and they
Um,
couldn't speak to them.
mhm.
Most people couldn't speak to that.
Did most people know Freud when Freud was doing his
Yes,
thing?
He was
absolutely.
pretty famous, pretty
That's my. They absolutely did. There is
after
no doubt.
40, I think. I think he was after
Yeah.
40 when he became.
Well, he died in 39, but
No, no, after he was 40 years old.
oh, I was like he
I think it
died in
was like
30.
yeah,
Yeah,
37 or something.
most people had a very, you can read a lot of books and they'll talk about it a lot. Like there was a popular understanding of Freud.
Hmm.
There was a popular understanding of Darwinism. There was a popular understanding of Marxism. These were systems that people had, and they might not completely understand them, but they could talk to them.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to read modernist literature and not get a little bit of Freud or Marx or Darwin. Um, I would say it's kind of hard to read 21st century literature that's coming out now and not get a healthy dose of academic intersectional philosophy. But to
True,
your
but
point,
again, I
to your
still don't know
point,
what it is. I don't know what it is.
yeah.
That's
Mm.
not. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm not saying that philosophy or ideas don't underpin modern art and modern literature. It's absolutely you can't quite work that way. But most people couldn't define them.
Okay,
They couldn't
fair enough.
speak to them. They couldn't speak to what is there, and that's part of one of these things is like people don't quite know. They don't quite know what's holding up their philosophical systems. They're just not there. They're there, but they don't know what they are. They can't quite speak to them because it's a lot easier to speak to sort of rivalries or to speak to sort of um, I mean I was gonna say sections, but just sort of to sort of speak along those lines.
Sectionalisms, yeah. Mhm.
Sectionalism, not intersectional, but sort of
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
lot easier to speak to and understand. And even holding up some of those, there are some of these other ideas we're talking about, but I don't know that there's a single discrete system that could be used to explain them.
Fair enough. If you enjoyed West Side Story and My Fair Lady and are looking for more adaptations of Romeo and Juliet and Pygmalion, check out Pygmalion from 1938, starring Leslie Howard, and so very many adaptations of Romeo and Juliet, ranging from Franco Zeffirelli to that one with Leonardo DiCaprio from the
And things I hate
90s.
about you.
And 10 Things I Hate About You, which is definitely an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Join us next time when
Sorry, that's not Romeo. I'm sorry, I forgot that's not Romeo and Juliet.
It's
That's
Taming of the
No, no,
Shrew.
Taming of the Shrew.
Clueless is Romeo and Juliet.
No,
No, Clueless is
Oh, sorry.
that's
Jane
Emma.
Austen.
Oh,
That's Emma.
exclamation mark. Oh, exclamation mark.
That's
That's
Othello.
Othello.
I think we got them all, audience, if you didn't let us know on
Yeah. Well, there's Scotland, PA, which is an adaptation of Hamlet.
Lion King.
Oh,
Are we
yeah,
still
Lion King. Yeah,
Lion King is no Scotland, PA is an adaptation of Macbeth, starring Christopher Walken.
Really?
It is. It's actually a delightful movie. But anyway,
Tomorrow and tomorrow
and
tomorrow creeps along this petty pace from day to day. Is that the right one? Am I mixing up?
yeah. That's it.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It's my Shakespeare debut.
You can rate and review this show anywhere fine podcasts are available. For those viewing in YouTube land, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the Talking Studios channel for all our exciting content, and follow us on social media at Talking Studios. Check out other shows by Talking Studios, including Talking Pictures Trivia, where we explore movies through trivia, Keep Making Movies, where we explore micro-budget films, Limited Lexicon, where we play through text-based adventure games, and Get the Point, where we slowly reveal a movie poster and try to guess which movie poster it is. Got a question for us? Call the Talking Studios hotline at 201-467-8679 and leave a message. It may be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Adapt It, wherever fine podcasts are found.
Join us next time when we discuss dusting off the classics by exploring Ben-Hur from the 1960s.
Wow, Talking Studios.
Next week, we'll be discussing Ben-Hur. Pat, if you could give Ben-Hur an award, what award would it be?
Longest movie and book ever. I spent so long reading this book. Like so long. I started this a lot because I knew it was going to take me a while, and so I thought, okay, I will get ahead of the reading. So I was doing the other reading, and anytime I would finish any of the other books, I'd be like, gotta get into Ben-Hur. So I've been reading this book since like 2 months ago, practically. So it just like every single time I finish one of the other books, I start reading it. So it feels like this was a marathon. That was definitely a marathon reading. We'll probably talk about it next week. I like the beginning of the book. I really struggled with the middle of the book, and I actually read the last like 150, 200 pages in like a weekend. It actually cruised pretty quickly, but it is a long book and very 19th century, and the movie is very long. Like when you have an overture, an intermission, and then another overture after your intermission, your movie is too long. You need to cut it. That is my award. Longest. KJ, what about you?
Well, I'll agree. It was long. But you know, I don't just want to give it an award. I want to start a whole new set of awards. So spoilers, audience, here it comes. A lot of this movie is based on a tile falling. A tile falling from a roof. I mean, it's a pretty high tile. But are there any other movies where something so inconsequential starts everything else? And I think it should be, this movie should start the best tile falling award. And it's like jumping the shark. Like you're going to give the tile falling award to other movies where just because you happen to be standing on the roof when something important happened, the rest of your life is absolutely ruined or completely redeemed, I guess, if depending on how we want to take this movie. So
I guess it's the Sliding Doors Award. That's the plot of Sliding Doors, right? It's this little thing changes everything.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen that one.
I actually haven't either, but I know the plot of it.
Good Lord, we can't talk about movies we haven't watched.
Yes, I suppose so. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like a movie in which something very small happens that has these giant consequences.
I was thinking like Blue Velvet where he finds the tiny toe, but that's kind of actually
No,
like
the
kind of a big
ear.
deal.
Yeah.
The ear, it's
I
an
guess when you
ear,
find
right?
an ear, that's
That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, actually, that's not an insignificant thing. So that's why I was like, actually, that doesn't really work.
How
But
often does that happen in Massachusetts?
you know, we live in the country
Often.
now. I lived more frequently than New York City, apparently.
How about you, Tom? What award would you give Ben-Hur?
I would say most grimacing by a shirtless male lead that's not in a porno. Most of this movie is watching Charlton Heston grimace angrily for 3 hours. I think he's
Sometimes in pain. Sometimes in pain. Yeah,
sometimes in
sometimes it's pain.
pain. Yeah.
Yeah, but it works in Planet of the Apes.
Well, because he doesn't have to talk in Planet of the Apes. That's the whole plot.
He just grimaces.
speak.
Yeah, all he's doing is just tightening his teeth and just going for it over and over again, and it's exhausting. I enjoyed a lot of the movie, but there's a lot of the movie where it's just there's just a lot of Heston in a lot of the movie, and it is pretty tiring.
But you have to admit that the grunting scenes and the gritting scenes are better than the talking scenes.
Yeah,
When
they
he
seem
has to
be.
talk with Esther, it's painful. I
Yeah,
mean, those
it's
scenes are. My wife walked in at that point. She was like, "What are they going on about? This scene is not ending." She's like, "This
Yeah.
is already a really long movie. Why are they talking so slowly and with so many pauses?"
Oh, yeah, she might be worse than he is. I mean, she is also really quite uninteresting to watch. But
So, side note, I watched the extras on the DVD,
mhm.
and one of them, they have Charlton Heston there goes, who was the director?
William Wyler.
Wyler. He goes, Wyler came up to me and said, Chuck, for this one, you got to be better. I said, how better? What's better? He goes, I don't know, but we got to be better. And I don't think we ever figured it out.
Oh. Anyway, we will get into that joyous film next week, audience. Stay tuned.